Hey, what's up you guys? It's your girl Kenysha. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back, my loves. Welcome back. Today I thought I would talk a little bit about money and protecting yourself in your marriage before you get married, as well as if you go through a divorce. What might be some things you could do that I tried, as well as some things you could consider that I considered along the way. So the reason why I figured I would share these lessons learned with you guys is because it seems like the Divorce Diaries is really resonating with some of my audience out there. Obviously, the way that I started my channel has been through a journey of handbags, if you will, starting off with handbags and my love for them, my passion for them, my beauty that I see in them, the artistry in them, if you will. And that extends obviously behind me to shoes you'll see. So behind me are just some of the things that as I've been unpacking and going through storage, I've been reconsidering whether or not I want to remain in my collection or not, and things that may or may not go up for sale in a future vlog sale, or sometimes I do private sales and I just take it to consignment, or I'll just list it online, or I'll just sell things. So these are just things that I'm considering, and I'm not really one to make fast decisions, so I have to put it out there as I'm going through things in order to start my consideration process. So that's what's going on, and you guys are just part of that journey with me. But today's video was about money because money played a real factor in my divorce, I feel like, as well as to a certain extent in my marriage. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because there might be some lessons that I certainly learned along the way that maybe if we could have done things differently, I would have. And hopefully I can save you guys a boatload of money if you end up going the divorce route, or even if you're not going the divorce route, but before you get married, you might want to consider ways that you could protect yourself. So my story is not necessarily everyone else's story. My story is definitely my own background. So the first thing I will say is I got married at the tender young age of 28. I had met my then husband when I was 24. We dated for 3 years. We were engaged for 1 year, and then we got married when I was 28. And the reason why I said is because where we met was in college. So my story is different from some people. You know, we met in college. He was my college sweetheart. We grew up together. That's a little bit different from, I think, being someone who has worked through their 20s, maybe into their 30s, and become a little bit more established. I think that we were young and we grew into our wealth together. It was fair to split our assets 50-50. I think my issue, and it will sort of reveal itself along the way, was the greed that entered into the situation that I didn't necessarily think was necessary. Once again, there's a saying that the person that you divorce isn't the person that you marry. So a lot of things came out in the end that was not the person that I married, including greed, selfishness, anger, just a lot of things that I hadn't really seen before. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's something that you need to watch out for. It's just something to be aware of. In today's terms, getting married at 28 is rather young. I know people are starting to get married in their 30s and 40s, if at all. Also ended up not having kids in my marriage for the first 5 years intentionally. We waited the first 5 years, which again, I know isn't something that everyone can do, wants to do, etc. But in my situation, that's what it was. We both wanted to wait. We were young. We wanted to travel. We did. We were working. We're busy. We're getting to know each other. And then when we're ready to have kids, we did. And then we had teens. What that translates to is having been in a relationship so young and with someone for 18 years, I didn't have a lot of experience. He didn't have a lot of experience. We were experiencing each other. We were growing together. We were experiencing life together. I feel like when you're that young, you just don't really have a sense of what your potential is. So I entered the workforce not really knowing my potential and where all of my talent and potential would lead me. But I think that's the reason why I'm putting this out there, is because if you're young and you have dreams, big dreams, and a sense that you're going to make your life happen. Like, I've always had a sense that I was going to make things happen. I've been an exchange student twice. I've graduated. I've gone through college. I've gotten numerous degrees. I have accelerated through the leadership ranks in an organization of over 20,000 people. I knew I had purpose. I was very driven. I'm going to start breaking this down into 5 parts. So the first thing we're going to talk a little bit about is protecting yourself. I think if you feel like you have potential, you should look into right now, today, while you're young, a prenuptial agreement. It's interesting to talk about things like this, especially being someone who is a minority, a Black woman. Growing up, I'll be honest, these were not conversations that I had growing up for why, for what. It was really all about family, about love. I never thought I'd be divorced. I never thought I'd be married with kids. Taking that journey, I never thought I'd be divorced either. So these are certainly not the conversations that we were having around dinner tables, let alone with friends and family. No one around me was divorced. So these were just not the conversations that were playing out around me. I went through a very steep learning curve in the divorce process. And so one thing that came up as I was going through divorce was something called a postnuptial agreement. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about prenups and postnups, because a prenuptial agreement is something that you can do before you get married to protect yourself financially. And a postnuptial agreement is usually something that you can do to protect yourself after you get married, before, I guess, your assets build, but it's basically after you get married, you try to put terms in place to protect your assets and protect what you have going into an arrangement in case there is a divorce, so that you can come out of that marriage with some of your assets. And I think with a prenuptial agreement, you're going into the marriage knowing what you have as your assets that are already separate from your partner that you're going to be marrying, and wanting to make sure that you retain what you went into the marriage with as your own. Because unfortunately, when you come out, sometimes you're not able to retain everything that you took into the marriage, which I don't think is fair and I don't think is right. What I will say is, going into the marriage, I didn't have a prenuptial agreement. I did have assets that I took into the marriage that ended up being protected, which was my 401k. I ended up having about $35,000 in my own 401k in my own name before going into the marriage that ended up being protected in the divorce. So that was not part of the divorce settlement. That was not part of the settlement at all. So I think that's really important to know. But I think if you have more money in an account, like in an investment account, than I did, then something like a prenuptial agreement is something to consider. If you have millions of dollars, if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars, I don't know how courts would look at a situation like that. All I know is with my situation, it was protected, but you might still want to protect yourself. Now, the reason why postnuptial agreement came up in my marriage is because my ex-husband cheated on me. At the time when we were working through whether or not we would try to stay together, I was looking into a postnuptial agreement to say what I wanted out of the marriage as a result of him having cheated on me. Obviously, it was going to be a lot. So that was something that I actually had a lawyer look into and draft up for me and had sent to him. We did not get back together, clearly. So that was not a factor. Having him sign off on the postnuptial agreement was only going to be a factor if we had gotten back together, because I wasn't going to stand for any more cheating. So clearly we're not together because he couldn't control himself, because he probably wanted to continue in the ways that he was going. And obviously I wasn't going to stand for that. So that is prenups and postnups. Postnups protect you after marriage, protect the assets that you want or have after you've gotten married, and prenups protect you before you get married. The second words of wisdom pertains to lawyers. And so my suggestion would be to keep lawyers out of divorce, if at all possible. If you end up in a marriage and you can try to talk to your significant other about trying to remain on good terms and not involve attorneys, it's going to be in both of your best interests, because the assets that you have do not get depleted by having to pay out 2 attorneys, okay? One for your spouse and one for yourself. And so this didn't work, unfortunately, for us, because I ended up having someone who started to become very greedy. They wanted to have more of my retirement account than I was willing to give. So what that resulted in was me needing to retain an attorney in order to protect my assets. So that's, I think, was a really sad situation, because initially I feel like we both could have come out of our divorce in a satisfactory manner. And what the courts try to do is they have a starting point, the courts do. They want to start you at 50-50 is what they want in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth. They want you to be about, equal, not equal, but they want there to be some level of equality in the split that's happening. So what that meant for us is we had property and we had assets. We had everything. We both get something of everything. I didn't want the house, so I got more of my assets. I wanted to keep my she shed, my little work area. So that was like part of the property that I wanted to have, as well as this timeshare that we both had is now mine. So I gave him the house, basically. He had to pay me out. That's something else to talk about, is you're not just ever giving anything. He has to buy out the house. My name is on the deed to the house. So there's a refinancing process that he has to go through in order to secure the house in his own name. And if he can't get that, then we're selling the house. At the end of the day, that's not my problem. That's not what I wanted out of the relationship, because why would I want to be in a place that I did not feel safe in? That's how things worked for me. That was my situation. So again, in that situation, being 50-50 out of the assets and the property, 50 of it is where they want to start. But then it goes into different levels. If you get into like 55%/45% of the division of the assets, 60-40% division of the assets. That is where the courts start to decide among how to split assets. And that's the reason why I say, at the end of the day, where we landed was pretty much where I think we could have landed if we had just talked to each other in a friendly, amicable way, since we had been together for so long. But at the end of the day, I think when walking away from someone who I think considers you to be their possession brings out the worst in them. And this man definitely turned into someone, and is still someone I do not recognize and do not want to be around. That is the reason why, even when I'm suggesting to you right in the moment to try to keep lawyers out of it, I think sometimes you will find yourself in a situation where it's inevitable. It's impossible to involve them, because you need to protect yourself, or someone will try to railroad you. And at the end of the day, I'm not having that. You can do what you want to do, but I wasn't having that. Part 3, number 3. So this is about having your own, because I heard the story about this soccer player who ended up going through a major divorce where his spouse, this woman, was trying to take him for 50% of his assets. She ended up not being able to get anything from him because 100% of his assets were in his mother's name. His paycheck was going into her bank account. His sponsorship deals would be signed off and be going into his mother's bank account. I guess they may have had like an account to pay bills, but when it came to the savings, the investment, the bulk of his money, it was not in an account where his wife had access to it. How she did not know this all the time she was with him, I don't know. And that's not our business. But at the end of the day, the man was able to protect his assets by having his own, essentially. So having your own looks like having separate bank accounts. I know a lot of people are going to say, this is terrible advice, because when you get married, two become one. But when you get divorced, one become two. Okay? So have your own bank accounts, but have a joint bank account with your spouse. Like we had that. At the end of the day, this ended up really saving my bacon, having my own account. When I first got married, and I think this is another red flag to look out for, my ex-husband did not want us to have joint accounts. He wanted us to have a joint account for paying our bills, but he wanted us to have separate accounts. This was his decision. Why? Because when we first got married, I had a lot of student loan debt, $100,000, and he only had $22,000. And there are a lot of red flags, I think, in the relationship that when I look back on and think about, I definitely should have known sooner there were some challenges that would be coming. especially related to money, because this one was right in the beginning of him wanting to disassociate himself from my debt. I feel like that was not something that I took to heart. If anything, it made me really work harder to pay off the debt. But as a result of having worked harder to pay off the debt, the extra money that started flowing into my investment account started to really flow once I realized I could make money, enough money to get rid of student debt, enough money in order to replace everything that I had to pay for and then some. The reason why it's important to have separate accounts is because, again, this saved my bacon. If I didn't have my own money, I very well may have been trapped in that house with that man, because what he did was go into our joint account and move all the money out of it. Money I had put in, no less. There's just some things you need to be very aware of happening. And I am so sick to death of women who find themselves in the situation where they had their joint accounts, that they were slow to go get themselves some money. You have access to the joint account. Go to the bank account, write yourself a check from whatever the balance is in there and withdraw that money, because you're going to need it. And at the end of the day, he didn't care that I didn't have any money. He didn't care that he did that. They don't care. They don't care. He didn't care. If I didn't have any money, he didn't care. So that means what? That means being subjected to what? Anything. No. Have your own money, have your own account, and go somewhere where you can be safe. So that's number 3. Number four is something that we just talked about related to money. Divorce is expensive. Divorce is an expensive undertaking. And the more money you have, the more expensive it gets, because it's so invasive. When you go through divorce, you have to go through something called discovery phase. Discovery means you have to open up your accounts. You have to share what you have, your assets, and your partner has to do the same thing. There's no privacy. Now, this gets expensive on multiple fronts, because now your partner knows what is in the accounts, and obviously they want as much of it as they can because they're greedy. But then so do the attorneys. The attorneys have an insight into who's got what and how much. And of course, they want their cut too. So again, if you can keep attorneys out of the situation, it's beneficial for everyone. It's beneficial for your future. It's beneficial for your partner. It's beneficial if you have kids. It benefits the attorneys, obviously, if they're involved, because they want to slice your pie. They want to slice up what you got. I think between the two of us, at the end of the day, we probably spent about $50,000 on lawyers. Our assets went down the drain into other people's pockets and made other people richer because of his greed. And I think that's a very sad thing, because those resources are things that we could have had for our kids. You know, it could have just gone in other directions, and a sad way to see hard work go down the drain, as well as like our relationship devolve into just basically dollars, transactions. And the stupidest thing that we did was spend $50,000 on attorneys. Because I know he spent a good $20,000, and I probably did too. Out of greed and out of me needing to protect myself, we spent too much money. And I think that's sad. I think it's really sad. But number 5, and to close this out, is if you feel like you're not going to be able to make your marriage work, but you also don't know where you're going to come up with the money, don't let that stop you from exiting a situation that does not benefit you, that does not serve you, that is harming you. There are resources out there that can help you. In Pennsylvania, they have the Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania was someone that I contacted and looked into. And they have many other resources that are provided to you when you're a victim of abuse that is free of charge. Obviously, there are people who are working for the government, for the Commonwealth, so they're going to be quite busy, and you, as a result, need to be very organized and diligent about being very responsive and on top of things when you do communicate with your attorneys. But I don't feel like there are no resources. I just feel like don't let yourself lose everything that you've worked so hard for. Don't let yourself get scammed by your partner, and make sure you do everything in your power to fight for what's rightfully yours and to protect yourself. So that's what I just wanted to share with you guys related to money, respect to just trying to protect yourself and your assets. Ways that I did and things that came up for me that ended up being beneficial to me. I hope that it might help someone out there who might be or might hopefully isn't going through what I went through. But if you are going to be going through a divorce situation, hopefully you can take some of these lessons away and have a satisfactory outcome. So if you were with me to the end, thanks so much for tuning in, and I will catch you in the next video. And I hope you like and subscribe by now and that you are following me on Instagram and TikTok. And until the next time, smooches, deuces, peace.